we'll call the meeting to order at 6:33. First thing on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Next is any correspondence, visitors, and public comment. Anybody received anything, or any members of the public like to make a comment? All right, hearing none. Agenda review, any amendments for tonight's meeting?
It's not an amendment. I do have an employee leave request, and I did not put it in the, I didn't put it in the drive. So, but I can speak to it, so that'll be fine.
Okay, that is on our agenda, I believe.
It is on
right?
the agenda. I just was double checking.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So next is our consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our November 17th meeting.
Devin?
Yes.
I have a question on the minutes. I don't know if Pierrette's with us tonight.
She is.
Or Megan. But
I am here.
Okay. In the minutes, it said the revised minutes were passed. I think that's what it says in our minutes. The revised minutes were passed.
Yes, and I made those corrections that you had asked for in the minutes and posted those.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I would say is it's been my experience, which could have been bad or wrong, that when you pass revised minutes, you put in what the revisions were. Like the revised minutes were passed and note what it was. I'm not saying you can do that this time, but I just think that if we revise minutes, people who are reading them should know what the revisions are.
Okay, I will do that.
And because it was my revision, I don't care if it's in there or not, to be honest with you right now, but I just think it's a good practice if we do revise them, that we stay with the revision is. Thank you.
There.
All right. So still looking for a motion to approve the November 17th meeting minutes. Dawn is a first. I see a second from Terry. Any discussion? I'll note that on page 4, I believe it says front page forum. I believe that's actually the front porch forum is the name of that. So just one quick little edit.
Thank you. Good catch.
Could everyone please make sure they're muted? I'm just hearing a lot of background noise.
All right. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor of approving the November 17th minutes with the one edit, please raise your hand. Yes, so we've got, can I see everybody? So they are approved. I count 7. Are there 7 of us? 7-0. All right. Next item on the agenda is the MVU Administrative update. So I'll turn this over to Dan or Jay, whoever's, looks like Dan's on.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. Hopefully everybody was able to see the report. We put some links in there for you this time, so hopefully you were able to access those. Just want to keep people informed. The COVID testing, back on Tuesday, November 17th, MVU and district employees had the option to be tested. I think you guys may have received some of the information about this in the last board report or the last report from the elementary schools. But approximately 250 MVSD employees took advantage of the testing. As far as I'm aware, there were no positive tests. I think overall, the numbers that I'd heard, it was close to 10,000 state employees, teachers, educators, people that worked in schools that were tested, and only 22 of them had tested positive. None that I'm aware of in MVSD, so that was good news. Currently, we have a couple of food drives going on, both in the middle school and the high school, and to encourage people to bring in non-perishable food items for the holiday season. Both programs are collecting for the local food shelves. We're also collecting hats, mittens, gloves that are in good condition. And definitely wanted to thank Don's wife for knitting up a couple, 5 pair of mittens for us. So that was great. Full remote preparedness. We continue to do weekly contact tracing drills. Sometimes they go really well, sometimes they don't go well, but this is why we do them, so that we know where we need to get better. And whenever we do a drill, we typically do a middle school student, we do a high school student, and oftentimes a faculty member as well. And we literally go through their entire day and find out where they were, kind of retrace their steps, who they were near, and everything else. And part of the change that we've asked from teachers this year is that they submit their seating charts to Steve Messier, so that we have current seating charts, so that in case we were to get a case, we would know who sat around that individual. And we go back and we check with the bus companies to determine whether the student was on the bus or not, and just kind of where we need to improve. And so we continue to work with our faculty around the preparedness piece of it. I truly believe that if we were able to, or I think that if we had to go remote in some cases, like say for example, we had a positive case in the middle school on a particular team, we could have that one particular team itself, if they needed to quarantine and not affect the rest of the building at all. And we could certainly do that in particular high school classes as well. So, people are doing what they need to do. So it's been great news. The December family newsletter went out the last week of November. We kind of changed up the format a little bit on that. Hopefully people were able to take a look at that. Of course, no sooner we sent it out and then we got the latest news from the state around athletics. And so literally we sent it out, and then literally, I think it was 40 minutes later, the guidance changed, and all of a sudden all the winter sports were on hold. And so, we had already sent it on out. So Athletic Director John Lumsden had sent a note out to people, kind of letting them know, and we posted it on Facebook as well. And Steve Messier just wanted to kind of spotlight the social emotional learning that we're continuing to do each month. This month, a US or a MVU social studies teacher, Courtney Molinaire, will be the December video for the social emotional learning. And I'm trying to think, I think that was about it. The full remote preparedness, just so people are aware, in case we do need to go fully remote, Jen DeSorger created a video and sent that out via school messenger for parents, students, and staff, just in case we have to, particularly, in case we have to go full remote. But again, we're hoping we don't need to. So that's the going on. Excuse me, the going ons at MVU. Anybody have any particular questions? Terry?
It's not a question so much. I was putting it in the chat, but I just thought I wanted to give a heads up to that newsletter. I thought it was a great newsletter. It was fun to read. It was interesting. It kept your attention. It was really good. One of the best I've seen. So thank you. Great.
Oh, you're very welcome. So I showed it to Beth Grenier, kind of to give her kind of an idea of what I was looking for, and she just took it off and ran with it, and really put some life to it. So that was great. Yeah. I had a lot of good feedback around that. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Dan.
Yep.
Next up is the early childhood director presentation, and then Chris, you can have the reins back when Wendy's all done.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me tonight to talk with you about a remote preschool academy option for families this year. This idea came about because when we were returning in the summertime and opening our classrooms, we had enrollment that had been identified in the spring of families who were interested in coming to preschool in person. And we wanted to know, given everything going on, did anyone's plans change over the summer? So we sent out a survey in August to families and found about 40 people had 40 families who were sending children to Swanton, Highgate, or Franklin schools were saying that they were thinking of keeping their child home for a variety of reasons, and indicated they might be interested in a remote option if it was available. And so I worked with our teachers across our program. We have 5 classroom teachers, and we designed a remote preschool academy option, which we got up off the ground and running. We sent out the information packet in September to families, and I'm going to go ahead and just present now so you can get an idea of what families received. The first month in September was an overview to tell families what it would be like, because we wanted them to understand that they would be partnering with a teacher in our early childhood program, but that really they would be their child's first teacher at home. And so we sent home a PDF that looks like this, along with a welcome bag of materials. And it included basic supplies that they might need at home, scissors, pencils, crayons, glue, some manipulatives, and supplies for them to get going, and just outlined what this option would be. Every month we have a welcome letter from me. And in the first one that went home, I wanted to introduce everybody to our team of teachers. These are our licensed early childhood educators from across the district. And these 5 teachers meet virtually and connect together every month to fill in a common curriculum for the remote preschool academy. And that is explained in this welcome packet to families. And really, the curriculum that's going home is an adaptation of the curriculum that's being taught in our school-based preschool classrooms. So these 5 teachers look at the curriculum that's being taught in their rooms, and they ask each other, how could we translate this learning experience that children are getting this week in our classrooms into an activity that can be done at home? Most of the activities that get sent home in the remote preschool academy can be incorporated into the family's daily life and daily routines. We wanted the families to see that they can really be teaching their child throughout their daily activities. Some of the activities are ones that maybe require a little bit of planning or materials that come to the family in a bag each month, and they have the support from the teacher. So we had a little meet the team with some bios from the team, and then explained that each month the family would get a book, and the teachers center a lot of the activities each month around the book, and that started in October. And that this is really a choose your own adventure for the family. So they'll get the curriculum each month, and they can pick and choose the activities to go along with what fits into their life. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that's going for families. We are having a wide variety of participation, and it varies from a little bit that they fit in between their work schedule and maybe the child's going to childcare, all the way to families who are doing all of the activities every week. Then I reviewed what the different curricular areas are that they get each month. We focus on social emotional, literacy, math, science, motor development, and art. And then this first month, we just sent home kind of a menu of ideas of things that they could do at home. And we touched on those in each of the areas. What I want to focus on now is I'll skip through toward the end of this. I want to show you that every month we also send home resources to the family to support the parent. And this first one that went home, I linked the Vermont Early Learning Standards as well as PBS for Parents. The Vermont Early Learning Standards are really the foundation of what we do, and they make it really clear what each child should have for experiences before coming to kindergarten that will help them be prepared. And then I also linked the PBS Parents for Parents site because Vermont PBS has paired with the Agency of Education for pre-K up through grade 12 content for students learning at home and to support parents in learning at home. So out of the 40 families that said they might be interested, 17 in the beginning signed up. And since then, we have had more join in the remote preschool. And beginning in October, that is the month that we started, and that was the first month that they got their book. And now that we are in our routine, each month the learning guide that goes home is broken out week by week. It talks about the book. There's a letter at the beginning from me introducing them to the ideas of the month. It talks about what book they'll be getting. And then I always include the Vermont Early Learning Standards. Each week I like to highlight one so that families can really connect what they're doing with their child through the Remote Preschool Academy to the Vermont Early Learning Standards and begin to understand what those mean. So those are always included. And then they have activities for each week in each of the 6 curricular areas. We try to put it in language that's easy to follow and easy to understand. And each family is paired with a teacher coach. So the teachers divided up the families who were interested across the district. And every week, the families get a check-in from the teacher. At the beginning, they talk together about how much support they're looking for. Some families just want the guide and to receive messages through Class Dojo or Seesaw, depending on which school they attend. Some families want a phone call. Some families want a virtual meeting. And some families have opted for physically distant home visits. So it really varies across the district. And then each week, we have a show and tell. So parents can take pictures and words to share what their children did. I do have a lot of ideas as this grows for ways to make this a fillable PDF for families. But I wanted to share with you, this is the exciting thing. I have one example here. I have blacked out the name of the child. These are the kinds of things we're getting back from families now that are showing what the child did. And the families are documenting the child going through the activities and following the activities, and even including sometimes they include a narrative. And that is really incredible for families to be kind of taking the lead on sharing that back to the teacher. And the teacher and family will be working together this fall to use that documentation over time to fill in the child's child development assessment. Through the Agency of Education, we are required to use Teaching Strategies Goal Developmental Assessment. That's what we use in our school-based classrooms. That's what's used in the preschool partner programs for Act 166. And that's what's used for families who are accessing remote preschool. Now, we aren't always able to gather all of the data that we would collect on a child who's attending in person 10 hours a week, but it gives us a baseline of some of the basics. And it gives us a starting point to work on and set goals with the family based on where they want their child to go. So that's a brief overview of what we've put together. I'm thrilled and so proud of my teaching team for taking this on. In addition to teaching in person, they are really working well together, and they've been sharing that this has connected the buildings in a new way that's never really happened before for the early childhood program. They are feeling excited talking to each other about ideas for how to do these learning experiences, and in doing so, sharing even more about what they're doing in their own programs across the district. So it's really exciting. We have a lot of ideas for growing this in the coming year, and ideas for incorporating different media. Our director of technology, Robert Jarvis, has great ideas around using certain apps which would allow us to make a book available electronically so the child could scrub across the screen and turn the pages, or maybe use a device to document their own learning, teaching them at a very early age how to take pictures of their work, how to record their voice and talk about their work and describe what they're learning, and just really empowering them. So it's really exciting. I can't wait to see what the future brings for the Remote Preschool Academy. It's nice to have it in times where we might need an opportunity to support families virtually or remotely. And thank you so much for letting me come tell you about it tonight. Does anyone have any questions? All right. Oh, Terry.
I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you. That was great. I love your visuals, and it made me feel like I know much more about what they're getting. So thank you.
Yes. And as far as the value here, these students are students that could choose to be going to a preschool program and being receiving 10 hours a week and tuition for that we would be responsible for providing. And we are able to provide this right now with our existing resources. And so it really is incredible what we're able to offer, even including sending home the materials. We're coming in way under than what we would be paying the tuition. And we're connecting with families in a new way. And that's really what it's about. Sorry.
I just wanted to add one more thing if I could, and that is that I really like the way you added the standards
Yeah.
and getting the parents to start thinking of that. And it's just a great, learning for everybody going forward. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dawn.
Yes, Don?
Wendy, how long has each of our people on your team been with us? Some of them look familiar, but some look new. And I just wonder, do we have continuity here?
Well, we have everything from 20 years all the way to a new team, 2 new team members this year. So we do have a brand new teacher joining us in Highgate this year, April Lesperance. So she's new to Highgate and new to our team. She's not new to teaching. She's been wonderful. There's some amazing things happening in Highgate, and that's incredible. And then we have Simone Tefts, who is joined the team in Swanton in one of the 3 classrooms there. But we have people who've been on our team 5 years, 7 years, 20 years, depends on who.
Because I know in some places in the state, they have a very difficult time filling those slots with qualified people.
Well, I have to say Wendy has done a marvelous job recruiting and building our program, and we've had a wonderful program. I mean, this is an example of above and beyond as a way to reach families and to create something. It's been a ton of work for her, but I think it's paying off in terms of what's happening for students, but also we get to count these students as students, and we get to not have to send tuition dollars to a private program. We get to have it works for families, and it's working for the school. So it's a great inspiration. I appreciate the work you put into it, Wendy.
Thank you. Well, one other potential that lies here, it really is full of potential. When you talk, Dawn, about people, districts struggling to fill positions, one area of the early childhood world that struggles to fill with qualified licensed teachers are the partner sites who want to participate in Act 166. And so there is interest and potential in partnering with the school district in a new way, where it would not be some partners, it wouldn't be just us sending tuition dollars. Instead, they would be turning to us and maybe using our remote preschool academy. And then we can be connecting with them in a new way and really providing that curriculum, the quality curriculum for students attending at private partner sites. So there's a lot of potential here, and I look forward to keeping you up to date as time goes on.
I have a quick question. I know in years past, I don't know about in other schools, but in Highgate, we've had like a lottery system or as need for pre-K. Would this be a possible solution in the future for capacity issues or the ability to serve more kids, I guess?
It sure could be. Right now with the current pandemic situation, we are serving all of the children whose families want them to access in-person preschool in our school buildings. And we're serving the children whose parents want to teach them at home with Remote Preschool Academy. And for the most part, the few people who have come looking for Act 166 partner sites who haven't been involved in it before have been able to find a spot. But this could definitely be something down the road, especially if we're able to partner and expand the pre-qualified partner site opportunities. There are no pre-qualified partner sites in Highgate, for example, because the partner programs may meet all of the qualifications, but may not have a licensed teacher. And so one of the things that AOE has put in place is that they could partner with a teacher for 3 hours. This might be a way to help that happen and have a virtual connection with that program and really serve to coach the people who are working in those programs and provide more opportunities for kids that are a little more equitable. Kids would be getting the same opportunities and curriculums. So potentially, Chris.
Thank you, Wendy. That was great.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Let's see. Thank you, Devin, for covering for me while I was late. And I believe we're on to the superintendent report. Julie, you're muted.
Keep trying to block out the unnecessary noises. So the first thing I wanted to share was our talking about snow days. So if you'll see in the newsletter, there've been a lot of conversation, and I will tell you, in July, it sounded like a great idea. The governor delayed the beginning of school. The legislature reduced our requirement for 175 days. We typically have 179 student days built into our calendar. And we have 4 of those days can be used as a buffer for snow days so that we don't need to make them up. So it sounded like a great idea with the advent of remote learning that we could have a remote day instead of a snow day. Well,
Julie, you're muted again.
Happened. That is odd. Sorry about that. As you look into the practicality of what goes into calling a snow day, we wanted to make it really clear to families that teachers are preparing. There may be times when we know a storm is coming. It's 100% going to dump, 12 inches on us between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. You know those scenarios. Once in a while, we really have good warning and we're really sure. Most of the time, it's 4 in the morning and there's ice on the road that no one expected. Or the snow came earlier than we thought it would come. Or the snowplow's not working somewhere. Those kinds of things are what happen most of the time. Add to the fact that in order to really call it a day, we need to make sure that we're feeding families. So if it's not safe on the road, or children, if it's not safe on the road, that makes it a little bit difficult. We'd have to have food available for students to pick up, which of course we would do if we were doing a remote day in that way. So the gist is, it will likely be this year that we will have snow days. Their teachers will not work, children will not have to work remotely. It could be, if it's a Wednesday at MVU, it's a planned remote day anyway, that would likely be a remote day for the MVU kids. They wouldn't have to make that up. So there's going to be some variables there. There is a possibility with the big storm everyone knows is coming, that kids could have Chromebooks sent home, materials sent home. But of course, we would then have to cross our fingers that everybody had power, and that people were able to do independent work. So I don't want people to count on that. I do want people to pray to the weather gods that it's a decent winter, and that we have to expect that we're going to have to make up school days at the end of the year in June. We have one day built into our calendar that is above what the legislature says we have to provide for student days. So we have one day cushion, but after that, we would have to be making up those days. Obviously, after graduation, seniors are not going to be coming. That's not a question, but we would expect the rest of the students to come back and make up those days. And I know teachers would make them fun and engaging and all of that, but it may also be in some ways better for students to be in school in June, when they can be outside more and things will likely be a little better than in January, when people tend to be sick and everybody is not vaccinated yet. And so there are those that also I think plays into it. But I wanted to give folks that heads up, and I'll send a letter out to the community and put it on Facebook and so forth after tomorrow. So then I share my letters about the governor's decision to announce an hour before school let out on Tuesday that schools would be responsible for asking families if they gathered in multifamily gatherings. I made it really clear in both my letters that the school district was not, the governor said that, and he, often will make statements trying to make a point, trying to be really strong, really trying to send a message home. I'm sure he was referring to the guidance that schools received the day before that stated that should schools want to, they may ask that question. That guidance came out because some schools, for example, in Washington County, where the cases are really high, they wanted the ability to say, this student needs to go home and quarantine. And that was above and beyond what the executive order said. And the original advice from the Agency of Ed is, you can't do that. These rules are not in place for us to exclude students from school. They're here to turn the corner for community behavior so that we can really try and put the lid on this virus. So then the governor said what he said. The press just reported on it as if it was true. Over the weekend, then the press started to realize, oh, the guidance isn't matching what the governor said. Governor did a little backpedaling. It's a very difficult situation for schools to be in the position of judging people's adherence to this, where no other entity really is in that position. And there are so many variables out there of, family members that you care for are okay. Family members in another situation are not okay. So it was really important to us that we made it clear that the school was not going to take that extra step and be the arbiter of whose family gatherings were okay and whose were not. I will say that if something comes to our attention that we didn't go looking for, but somebody, said, boy, I had 100 people at my house, people will call a parent and talk about that. But we're not fishing, we're not looking. On the other hand, we very strongly, and some people did interpret my letter as encouraging people to do whatever they wanted. That was not the intention of the letter. We very much want people to adhere to, use common sense and follow the rules. I had to send a second letter because the Department of Health updated their guidance based on the governor's statements to say, if you do have a gathering, you need to quarantine. That was not the case earlier in the week. They sometimes have to play catch up with the governor's statements. So I just wanted to make sure, I know that I shared all of those letters with you as I was sending them out, but I wanted to make sure you understood where that would, we really want to balance the safety of our students and faculty and our ability to run school. So, it's going to be a tough winter. People are going to want to gather. People are going to want to gather for Christmas. I couldn't possibly predetermine what the governor will do in the weeks before Christmas I don't plan on making any plans because, an hour before Thanksgiving break started for our teachers, everything gets put up on its head. So we have to plan for changes all the time. But I appreciate, it was really clear that the majority of families in our communities change their plans. And I think it will hopefully make a difference. For some reason, go ahead, Chris.
Megan.
I just had a quick question. So for those situations where, a student is saying, oh, we had so much fun playing with our cousins or so on, and you have that conversation with the family and you know that they violated the guidelines, are those students being told like you have to quarantine for 14 days, or are they being allowed to stay in school?
What we are not doing is investigating people's behavior. If there's something that comes to our attention that's, pretty serious, we're not going to ask children any questions. We're not going to ask high school students any questions. Sometimes people will say, some people were calling us up and saying, I'm doing X. Tell me about this. We are directing people to the department, to the governors and the Department of Health website. And as my letter said, if you send your child to school, if you come to work, then you are verifying that you believe you followed the governor's order. That is the same level of what we ask people to do when they're traveling. It's the same level. We are asking people to be honest when they say their child doesn't have the sniffles. We're asking people to be honest when they say there's no fever. We are taking temperatures, but everything we do is based on trust with our families and community. Some people will bend that. We have to, if something really big comes to our attention, a phone call will happen. But for the most part, we don't want to put that in the position because, Megan, there are so many instances. I heard of one today where a family was calling the Department of Health, and their circumstance, the Department of Health says, no, you don't need a test. You don't need to quarantine because you're providing care for that family member. They need groceries from you. You do that. So you are allowed to have had Thanksgiving with those folks. We're not the Department of Health. I don't want to be making health-based decisions. If they have questions, they should be calling the Department of Health or looking at the Department of Health website. It's really not fair for our paraeducators out front with a thermometer to be asking, it's a tough situation to have been put in, frankly. And our schools and principals and staff are doing the very best they can to walk the line carefully Yeah. Because the last thing we really want to do is send children home to not get an education if it's unnecessary. I do want to talk about a few more things. So, one of the next important things to share with you is Swanton's 6th grade. What the plan was to come back to full-time instruction the week of the 17th, I think. And we're delaying that right now. We have more cases in the community. We also have more students. We've had students move in that grade. So we now have more kids than we can fit into the classrooms. And yet not enough to hire another teacher. So we're pausing. We're not stopping, but we're pausing. In a letter, I'll share the letter with you, and it's going out to families of 6th graders tomorrow. But I just think that given those scenarios, it makes sense to pause and not bring those students back right at this time. As far as other schools, we have no intention of pulling back right now. I know that there are cases in the community. We had cases in Swanton yesterday, and I have to tell you that the process for contact tracing were very smooth. It's really tough. You have to wait for the nurses and the medical professionals to tell you what's real and what is being reported, either self-reported or filtered through a teacher to a nurse. You know, you really need to be waiting on the information from the contact tracing investigators who will really pinpoint when somebody was ill, when there were symptoms. And then we had a very good, very quick experience. They turned around a meeting right away. We had Wendy and I and Dina and Justina and the nurses met with the Department of Health and worked through it all afternoon and evening. But it was a very supportive and clear process. And I just can't thank them enough. The Department of Health was helpful. And then of course our team did a terrific job, and it was our first time. So you'd expect there to be bumps, you know, where's this list and where's that, you know, how do we make a spreadsheet out of that document? It was pretty seamless, it really was. And so I think we made a very good decision in terms of notifying everyone and closing the pod as a whole. So I think that is my, oh, the last thing I wanted to tell you is, and it's not in my newsletter, the last two things. The COVID case happened yesterday, and this last one, I got the official word today. So Dan mentioned that we were, all our teachers and all the teachers in Vermont that opted in were tested the week before Thanksgiving. Was it the week before, or was it the week before that? It goes by very quickly, doesn't it, Dan? But everybody was tested that wanted to be. And then from then on, you're in a new cohort. A quarter of the state is being tested at a time, and they're not doing it regionally. They're picking schools around the state. So there will be samplings across the state each week. Our next testing date will be the week of January 4th, so right after the Christmas break. And I've already filled out the survey, and it was a very smooth process, so I expect it to only be better this time. But that's the window when our staff will be able to test again. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Julie. I'm not seeing any questions. So thank you very much. And we will move on to new business. And the first up with that is the budget survey results.
Right. So after our last conversation, I created a survey that went out on a variety of platforms. We sent it to staff. We sent it on Facebook and on websites. It went out to families as well. And we received just over 500 surveys. And I want to share it with you. I did put in your drive another version of it without school employees in there because that question was asked. So I'm going to share my screen. So my hope is that I can compare the results that I'm showing here with those when you take employees out. Now, employees in our school district, a large percentage of them, I don't know the number, but many of them are also residents of one of our 3 towns. I did not set up this survey so that it forced you to identify in one area or another, and you couldn't choose multiple. So, in the future, I might just have an employee fill it out if they're only an employee, and if they are a resident, they would have to pick resident. So I might do that, but it doesn't really change the results that much. We really just wanted to get a sense of where people's priorities were. So all right. So one of the first question that we asked is, how important to you is the recruiting and retaining of quality staff? And in this response, there was 79% found it to be essential, 16.4% found it to be important. And that is pretty close to what the other, when you take employees out of it, I think that changes to 73% find it essential and 20% find it important. So it's fairly indicative of all the responses that we received. Smaller class sizes, always interesting about people's perception. 23% found smaller class sizes as important to them, essential, and 43% important, and 27 good to have. So clearly people see it as an important thing. That's very similar to if you remove staff from the response, it doesn't change much. The good to have category increases to about 30%, but otherwise it's fairly similar. Investments in technology, 33% find it essential and 44% important. Very similar. I won't do the comparison for each slide unless somebody asks me. Athletic opportunities for middle and high school students. 23% found it essential, 42% important, and 26% good to have. I don't think that's surprising. Unified arts, music, art, phys ed. Again, over 43% found it essential and 39% important. Supports for students' social emotional learning needs, 49% found it essential and 34% found it important. That's a very large number. really not that different when you take out staff. You still have 40%, over 40% feeling it's essential, and 38% finding it important. So a little shift in the numbers, but the gist is very similar, that it's very important. Whoops. Opportunities for advanced learning. We had 40% saying it's essential and 47% saying it's important. That is not dissimilar to what the other version shows. Interventions for students struggling academically, unsurprisingly, large percentage, 62% saying that is essential and 31% important. After school, support for student apprenticeships and work readiness. That's something that we want to do even more of. And we have 31% saying it's essential, 42% saying it's important, and 22% saying it's good to have. But over 70% finding it essential or important, I think, is a very strong indicator. I'm wondering if well, there it is. After school program, about 14% finding it essential, 30% finding it important, and 41% saying good to have, 12% saying not or less important. I would say that when you take the employees out, that shifts a little bit, with 12.8% saying it's essential and 23% saying it's important. So it's still pretty important, but the good to have category increases just a little bit. Student enrichment offerings, I didn't give examples of this, so I'm not sure. I think people made their own opinion up of what that meant, but I was really thinking of those not necessarily unified arts, but those other elective courses that students can take that are enriching to them, even programs or clubs. I mean, I was just thinking of anything that you might put in the bucket of enriching. And obviously, people do find that to be important and good to have. Student transportation, no surprise, but I thought it was a good one to ask since it is an important part of our budget. 51.8% feel that it's essential and 32.3% feel that it is important. That is very similar to the responses when you take employees out. And the last question really was about safe and well-maintained school facilities. 69.5% finding that essential and 27% finding it important, which I do not find surprising at all. So, and that didn't change really in any way when you take the employees out of that survey. So I did also ask how you usually find information from our schools, and the majority here talked about email from the school district. And that was still the largest number, even when you take employees out. But we also had Facebook, we had website, we had newsletters and notices from school as the other large ways people find out about school. Though some did also indicate school newspaper and conversations with community members and friends. And so finally I asked, what motivates you to vote on a school district issues? 77% are motivated by providing students with a quality education. 12.8% motivated as an involved citizen exercising their right to vote, and just under 10% motivated by keeping property taxes as low as possible. That changed when you take employees out, but not a ton. 70% were motivated by quality education, motivated as an involved citizen was about 16%, and motivated to keep taxes low, just it went up to 15% when you take employees out. So it really, generally speaking, was pretty similar. Again, as I said, just taking out employees is imperfect because so many of our employees are also community members. So that I thought would be helpful in our future discussions.
Chris, Julie, that's very good, very helpful. On the transportation, I'm a little surprised that more people didn't see it as critical or essential.
Right.
Is there any way to break these out, or that one in particular, between elementary, middle, and high school? Because I can see for high school parents, it might not be essential at all, maybe not even important, because they've got transportation. But that the numbers very helpful. But I thought most of them were right on what I might have guessed, but not that one.
Well, I would say
the transportation one, I can actually speak to a little bit because I've to at least one of the bus companies quite a bit about how much more parents drive their kids to school now than say even when I went to school. And they've mentioned to me that a lot more parents, at least the very least, drive their kids to school in the morning and maybe use the bus for riding home. But there's a lot more parents drop-offs than there used to be.
And that was pre-pandemic too, Chris?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
yeah, and I think the pandemic increased it.
I would expect that.
Yeah. But
Okay,
I can't look, Don, I can't do it instantly, but I can certainly look at the spreadsheet and filter and, and look at it to see if that shows us a pattern.
It's not that real. It's not that really important. You have a lot more important things to do. I just thought it was curious that it wasn't higher, because I remember in the old days when you talked about budgets and say we might have to cut transportation if this budget fails again, people went ballistic and say, well, you got to do that. That's a right. Well, it's a privilege. So anyway, thank you.
Yes.
Terry. Go ahead, Terry.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you, Julie. That was really responsive. It was shocking. I mean, you like the day after our board meeting, you had this ready to go. So thank you. The other thing, I'm really impressed the fact that you got 500 responses. To me, as part of the board development task force, to me, that's really a good sign about what we can look forward to in the future if we start coming up with some mechanisms on how to do this more systematically. So thank you for all that. And thank you for doing the little split. I was just curious. It's kind of interesting to me. I think there's a lot we could read into that, though, in terms of the SEL, that when you take the employees out, I don't think the public knows how important it is yet. So there's a lot of good information that came out of that. Thank you.
I think it helps, when we have difficult discussions or when we are trying to really speak to an increase or a shift in a budget, we can say, well, we're investing in our facilities, it's important to us, or, we really are committed to having our class sizes look a certain way, or we're committed to intervention so we can close that achievement gap. We can tie it to something that we know that the community values, that we value as well, and the board can speak to it in that way.
I think it's great. Thank you very much for doing that survey. The results were interesting to me. They're a little different than I was expecting, which is good. They were more positive than I was expecting. So,
did I see Jen DeSorger's name out? Did I see Jen DeSorger's name out there with the survey at one point? No.
When Julie sent it out, I put it on front Front Porch Forum, so maybe you saw it on there.
That's what I
why
saw. Yeah, that's great. That was good. I saw that and I thought, wow, this is good because remember, I'm the guy that said, let's use Front Porch Forum. So thank you.
Yes, I appreciated Jen doing that. It did help, I think, reach some extra folks. Peter, did you have a question?
Just wondering how we're going to use this information, and also the we're always interested in how to get information out there. If you had any surprises in how people are getting information, and obviously it's not by viewing our school board meetings.
Yes, I don't know that I was surprised by that response. But I was surprised that email seemed to be the biggest one. So we are obviously trying to increase our traffic on our websites, increase our traffic on our Facebook pages, reach folks in different ways. I think Dan's goal of really working with the newsletter and pushing information out to families are also helpful. But we have to think about those other ways too, and who we're not reaching with that. And in terms of the bigger piece, we wanted to get the input so we could see if our priorities and as board members, are you hearing and seeing, is there a match there? Because we're sort of stewards for the community and what their input and what they find to be important. That does not take away the expertise of the administrators in their buildings who understand what they need to run school and how many teachers it takes for math courses to run, and how many support staff are needed for students with special needs. Like those pieces are important, but when we know that people care about our facilities, people care about interventions for students who are struggling, people want, if somebody said, boy, we don't care about enrichment at all, then that might be a very different priority. But we really didn't see anything that people found to be unimportant. But we certainly saw some things that were pretty unanimous in their importance to people. But it's important to get input, and important even even as a mechanism to involve people and to have their voice as part of the process. But my hope is that it's informational for them.
I thought the after-school program.
Go ahead, Peter.
I thought the after-school programming, I thought that would get more support. It seems like more than half was good to have or not important. Whereas, I mean, I think it's really important to keep kids busy and out of trouble, and before parents get home. I think it's those are essential programs. I was surprised that didn't get more support.
I was a little too, especially since we heard a lot this spring or summer really, that it's a loss for families who are trying to work and have care for their children, and experiences, especially since kids were home and pretty isolated last spring. But we also had a large percentage of parents of middle and high school students who maybe don't find it as necessary for their students as the elementary students do. So that can be an impact as well.
Well, I look at it as an opportunity to educate people about how it's funded, what it offers. Primarily it's funded with a 21C grant. Actually, all of it's funded with grants. The rest of it's funded with Medicaid right now. So it's not a general fund cost. The general fund portion is actually funded with Medicaid. So I look at it in that way, where maybe, people were thinking that this was budget development. Maybe it wasn't a priority when you're talking about social emotional learning, but it is. If they found out there was grants funding it, then maybe they would think differently.
Devin.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback on that, I think getting these responses and the general public opinion, if there are spots in this survey where sort of the perception of the public differs from what some of our professionals, our administrators know in terms of like how important is one of these things to accomplish the goal of providing a good education. If there's a difference there, then it tells us there's an opportunity for messaging and communication to try to help everyone better understand the value in some of these things.
That's a really excellent point. Thank you. It helps us really communicate better.
I think on the after-school program, I was very impressed with our new person. Not that I didn't think Carol was doing a good job, but I was very impressed. And I think with her enthusiasm and visibility and getting her more exposure, I mean, I don't think she needs to come to the board every month, but I think to have her part of this and any other things we're doing is going to help the program, because I just think her enthusiasm is going to wear off, but it also gives her a chance to talk about a program and maybe mention something like what Laura just said to get it out there. So be optimistic and get more support.
Okay. I'm not seeing more hands raised. So, yep, we can move on to the next item under new business, which is the FY22 budget draft review.
Okay, so this would be draft 3, and I do realize how difficult budget development is during a virtual meeting. It's pretty much impossible for me to project that. I do add the items to the drive, but if there's a way I can make it easier for you, if you'd like a paper copy printed on legal paper, or emailing's better, please let me know if anybody has any ideas. It's just a large document, but we are trying very hard to update the notes as much as possible. So I did again include one that has notes. And we keep adding to those about where things have been moved as far as coding, FTEs, and as much information as we can. You'll notice in this draft, there's probably a lot of new notes under technology and facilities. Those were primarily where we were working on just gaining consistency in coding, and working with those teams of administrators and tech staff and facility staff, and just really discussing what is being purchased, trying to gain consistency, making sure there's not duplication, making sure things are charged appropriately. So there's a lot of conversations happening, which is great, with the right people. So I appreciate all the time that people are giving me to work on this. There are in this draft just some items to note that there are some proposed MVU positions that are new to this draft that I'm not sure, Julie, if you want to speak to those in executive session, or that would be open session probably. Potential grant funding for those, we'll come back to that, I guess. I'll just note a few other things right now. Julia shared with me the administrator cell phone stipends. It was requested that those be eliminated and rolled into salaries, and that would be something that was discontinued. So I have done that. We continue to review all of the service contracts that we have for tuition and outside services. That's an ongoing process. As late as last week, we were still receiving some contracts, and some delays due to COVID, but we need to do better with that with some of our service providers. Continue to work with the new chart of accounts, as I said, specifically to technology, interscholastics, and facilities. Supplies and equipment lines, we're looking at those. I've been pulling years of history, historical spending, trying to make sure that things are in line, and working with a new chart of accounts and coded properly, but mostly just looking at what has history told us, and not just budgeting the same $1,000 because we budgeted, but really kind of looking at the pennies and the spending historically, given that that's a little difficult since last year we ended in March with COVID, and this year's also being impacted by COVID, but we're doing the best we can. MVU is working hard right now, I believe. Dan or Jen, if you want to speak and interrupt, that's fine. On their department budgets, there were some kind of revamped forms this year with codes. I'm hoping it's working out. I think it was a little confusing for staff that we're eliminating codes, all new numbers. Little bit of a different strategy this year, which I think was also difficult, is we didn't include historical budget information because we really want it to be based on need, not necessarily what's been done in the past, and just going with that. So I really appreciate the administration's help in helping us, have those discussions. They're not always easy. Those will be turned in shortly. As I said, I continue to work with facility directors and talk about expenses. This draft does reflect a lot of adjustments for historical spending, new coding, and it's starting to reflect the facility long-term plan and their maintenance items that we've been discussing. I have met with all the facility directors except for Paul. He was unexpectedly out of the office ill, so but he's back now, so I will meet with him before the next draft. I've included a estimated transportation increase to our contract. I think I've mentioned to the board before that we were looking for a potential 1-year extension. We're at the end of a 3-year contract. We had 3 years of 3% increases with both companies that we work with. Under statute, we are allowed an increase that's announced, a renewal growth limit based on the need that's announced by the AOE. I do have that information now. So Julie and I will be negotiating and talking with the bus companies. As far as facilities are concerned, and as I was very happy to see in the budget survey that people definitely understand that facilities are a priority along with our students, making sure they have a safe place to learn. And I believe the board and the facility task force were looking to continue to move towards properly funding and budgeting for repair and maintenance and capital projects. We are working with the task force on continuing the process to look at performance contracting. We actually have interviews next week. So in interest of that and reviewing the capital project items, which can be add up very, very quickly, and what I'm already seeing with the facility directors, I've added a proposed increase in the capital project line in this draft of about $100,000. With that line was about $235,000 for all the schools previously. My proposed strategy is that if we add to that line a little bit at a time, then eventually we will end up where we were properly funding. Obviously, we can't do it all 1 year, and that's just a place to start. And if I know where actually meets the proposed capital projects that I have currently with the facility directors, given all the issues that we have, but it moves us in the right direction. And I think it's, again, maybe over the course of 5 to 7 years, we could develop a line item that actually is adequate without too much impact to taxpayers. So, Julie, I don't know how you want to talk about the MVU positions, if you want to do that now or later.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm looking there. I wanted to make sure I had your notes in front of me. We are definitely looking at the importance of a teacher for personalized learning plans, and that would be an added position. We're obviously looking for adjustments there, but we feel that just having students go through a planning process as additional work is not actually shifting how students think about their learning and their post-high school experience. And we really want someone who is teaching students how to do it, connecting students with experiences, working with our workplace experience person, working with the careers class, but really connecting students to that planning and then helping along the way. And our hope is that we would have a teacher teach it in 7th grade, 8th grade, and again in 9th grade, and then work with students throughout high school. So it would be both a consultation, but also a direct instruction teaching position, and work with guidance, obviously. We have a good deal of title carryover funding. We feel that this would be very good funding source to get this position off the ground. And then our hope would be that we would find places to build that into the budget. Another position potentially is an interventionist position, again, using for the middle school, Jen, primarily in literacy, so that we would be working with the middle school ELA teachers and with students to improve outcomes for kids who struggle. And then we have a long-term teacher who's been funded with the grant, and that grant is ending. So we're shifting that into another title funding stream. So both of those, all three of those possible positions, I think, are in alignment with what our goals are. But they're grant funded, but we're aware that grant funding is not always permanent. So we want to make sure that we're being planful about making sure we experience savings over time and move those positions out of grants if in the future if we feel that they're something we want to keep. Laura, I wanted to ask you, I'm sorry, I wanted to ask you, did we get our tax commissioner letter today?
No, I did not. Did you?
No.
Sometimes things are delayed getting to the business managers. I'm not sure why.
No, I did not see it, but I know it's December 1st. So
Yeah.
that's the date we usually get that information, but it'll be forthcoming.
And so the expenditure budget reflects an increase currently in draft 3, back sort of where we were with draft 1, which is a 1.97. That does include those positions, proposed positions, and all the items that I did talk about, including the capital project increases. So I'm not sure if anybody has any questions or where you want me to go from there. I know it's difficult when you can't actually see what I'm talking about, so I apologize.
I did have a couple questions for you, Laura.
Okay.
I had seen some news reports about the VHI premiums for next year being like another 10% increase. Is that what you're hearing, and is that what's built in to this?
They have submitted their proposals. VHI has to their admin team, and it is about 10.1%. Yes, I'm actually more. That's for next year, and Laura Suarez seemed about a month ago pretty confident that would be approved, but that's not a guaranteed thing. I'm actually more concerned about next year, given all the COVID issues and the problems that hospitals are having as far as financials and just the uncertainty about care moving forward and how people, the kind of the catch up and all of those things. VHI has very much made us aware that 10% might be the tip of the iceberg moving forward. And that's very concerning.
Is that 10% already in these numbers we're looking at?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I guess just my other question is, 1.9% is a pretty reasonable, year over year increase. Are there any other big costs out there, conversations you still have yet to come that may be adding significant amounts to this? Or are we kind of pretty close to what you see as a first round?
I think there'll be, the facility issues, I believe that I've incorporated them, the total amounts where they are reflected may be different. So we're still working through what's a purchase service versus a repair and maintenance item versus a supply versus a fixture versus a small equipment. So that those items might move around, but I don't see a significant change that I'm aware of. That being said, it's a $40 million budget. We work on it every day, all day long. So we're still making sure we didn't miss anything, crossing our T's and dotting our I's, but I don't believe so.
We will be giving an overview to the administrative team. We'll give them an update tomorrow, but we have some COVID triage to do. And then probably next week, we'll do a more detailed update to the full administrative team as a group. And so that, and have further meetings with principals and directors to make sure that their needs are reflected in the budget. But we want to make sure, if I'm just sharing what I think are priorities for my school building, I'm still not necessarily seeing the impact of the entire budget yet. So we want to make sure that we do that next week. But our hope, you know, we don't know the information from we don't know what the yield will be. We do not, I mean, we get tips. Last year was really tough with the equalized pupil count changing all the time. You know, it is a difficult year, so we don't know how variable some of the information coming from the state might be. We don't know what the common level of appraisal will be in this sort of interesting year. So, Laura, I don't know if you have any other.
The only other is the revenue, and you know, very typically around this time of year, I would have a much better idea of what our carryover is coming into this year. They've allowed us to use a different portion of our carryover coming into fiscal year 22 that does not have to be audited first, and that's due to the coronavirus relief funds that are coming in. But all of that is still in motion and still fluid. You know, even the amount, I just submitted my 4th version of the LEA grant this afternoon. And so I don't even have a good carryover balance from last year that I actually am confident in and know that they aren't going to claw back a certain portion of that. I know they are going to claw back. What I said was repurposed expenses, which I kept at a very minimum level than what I consider to be our contribution to the ed fund as a greater good for the whole state. But you know, until those checks hit the bank and new cash flows are issued, and you know, we have a better understanding, you know, the revenue side of this we're just looking at one piece, as Julie said. The revenue part is going to be a whole nother discussion. Hopefully in January we'll have a better idea of what that looks like.
At least we do have the legislature was so helpful with freezing our equalized pupil count, so that if it increases,
EDM,
that's fine, but we can't fall below what we were last year, and it was fairly decent last year.
The ADM cannot. The equalized people could go down slightly, but it shouldn't be impacted much at all.
Right. Sorry, the ADM, not the equalized people.
Don, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, Julie, going back to talking about MVU and the positions, that they certainly sound like they're needed. The one that with the personal learning plans, does that have to be somebody licensed in guidance, or can it be just a certified teacher in some subject area?
You know, we wanted to be a teacher. I don't know if we would have it be a guidance license. Jen, do you have thoughts about that? But we want it obviously to be a licensed teacher. It's not a content area, so I don't know that we are tied to any particular content area there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I just wondered because, well, we'll see. The agency may have some flexibility because if it's not content. But the other thing is, last meeting, we heard from Joyce and Franklin about a number of things she wanted. I would ask, unless the other board members say no way, but it would be nice to have the administrators rank those as some type of priority. I mean, they're all important. I thought when I heard Franklin, I'm thinking, yes, they certainly need a nurse there for, if not all day, a great portion of the day. But then there were some other things that are more like lights in my mind. And I just as a board member would like to hear the principal say, or at MVU, if whether it's Dan or Jen or Jay say, you know, we really need all of these, but if push comes to shove, these are our high priorities. Same way with the facilities people. Laura says they, you know, 100,000, and I think it's important we listen to them. But as we get into January, you know, this is December. I have one more meeting, and then January we're gonna have to make some tough decisions. So, just a thought.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. Don, would you like Jen to answer your question? She was about to.
Sure.
Hi, Don. We were thinking about, we certainly want a certified teacher. I think that we want someone who is passionate about personalized learning. And so we were looking at having the teacher push into some of the flexible schedule times that we have. So the WIN time in the middle school and T-Bird time in the high school. So it wouldn't be necessarily connected to a specific content area. It wouldn't necessarily be part of the student's record. I mean, the PLP would, but not a grade for that instruction. So I think we have some flexibility in the licensing so that we can find somebody who's really passionate about personalized learning, instead of, narrowing our pool by looking at a specific content area.
I'm very pleased to hear you say that, Jen, because I was involved in writing that legislation a decade ago, I guess. And that was one of the concerns, does that mean that you're going to have a math and science PPE, and then you're going to have a literacy and foreign language and add 3 or 4 staff? And even though we didn't have an answer, the general feeling was there must be somebody out there through guidance background or something that can help with the process, not necessarily the content of what your process designed. So that's good. I'm glad to hear you thinking that way. Good. Nobody's talking about priorities, so I guess we don't need any priorities. We just go with it.
No, I certainly think that our principals, as they work together, are going to have those priorities. What we really want is a target. Once we have our revenue and we're looking at our per pupil spending expenditures, we really want to see what that target is. Obviously the board is not going to encourage us to have a 5 or 6% expenditure increase. I mean, that's an assumption on my part, but I'm assuming that that's not the case. So we are trying to keep the expenditure increase to a certain level, including those priorities. And if the board then feels that we're not there yet, and we need to sharpen our pencils, then I think that we would definitely, I think the principals have their priorities reflected in this budget, but if we have to sharpen our pencils, that becomes a different conversation.
Okay, thank you, Julie and Laura. I believe we're ready to move on to the last section of new business, which is our budget communication plans.
Well, I wanted, given the conversation we had last week, I did the input survey. We're not going to be able to have in-person meetings with lots of people. So it's a virtual, I don't think we'll even be able to do Channel 15 in the same way that we did in the past. So I thought that it might be an opportunity to brainstorm different ways that we can reach the community. One thought I had was that we could create smaller budget presentations so that we could do areas of the budget. One where we talk about staffing, one where we talk about certain programs, one where we talk about facilities. So we do some shorter presentations with board members. Maybe we do some town halls as we move closer, because we can't go and visit communities. Obviously, our budget hearing will need to be a virtual one, and people will attend, but they might attend smaller ones where, Terry and Devin get together and have host a conversation with board members about the budget, and maybe there's a topic, right? So I don't know, I'd love to hear your thoughts, but I think that we might do better with more smaller events than one big event that's perhaps not well attended, and we might reach more people this way.
Yeah, I think that might be a great idea, especially if they're a little shorter and we have them recorded and we make them available for people to watch whenever they're available to watch them. Even if we just break up our typical Channel 15 thing into a few different 5 or 10 minute little snippets that are focused on topics. I think that those are all real good ideas, Julie.
Terry.
Yeah, I agree. I think it sounds like a really good idea.
I was thinking the same thing in the paper, and rather than maybe one large ad, of course, we would maybe do that, but I actually am a big fan of what Maple Run does with the color, and, it's an investment. I mean, it costs more money, but I think you reach those people that maybe you don't reach with social media. And if we could do maybe some smaller snippets in there, kind of something bright and colorful, really marketing what we're trying to accomplish. That was another suggestion, that and do it more frequently up to the budget vote.
Yeah, I think it was interesting when we asked about how people hear about information about schools. When you took out the school employees, I think you saw a larger number of people that pay attention to the local newspaper. It's still not as big as Facebook, but parents of children in school tend to look at Facebook. Folks that live in our community that no longer have children in school, even grandchildren in school, tend more to look at the newspaper or have conversations with neighbors or do things like that. So we want to reach people in different ways. And we've also talked about how we want to do our annual report. We got all that feedback from folks. We want to make it more inclusive, I think, of some information. Have it not just, we want to maybe invest in having them printed well so that it is more of a communication tool this time around.
Devin.
One other thought, maybe, if we put all this information out there in various ways, maybe in that last week or so leading up to town meeting day, seeing how much, the size of the response we got on your last survey, if we send out something that said, ask us your questions, so we can try to find those things where, we're obviously trying to predict what people want to know, and we're not going to get it all. So if we could solicit some questions from the community, we may find a few kind of frequently asked questions that we could then address in those last couple of days after people have had time to digest all the other information we've put out there.
I like that.
Okay, thank you. I believe we're done with new business, so we'll move on to old business. And first up is check warrants.
Usually Steve reads those. I'm not sure if another finance committee member wants to read them, or if you prefer I read it.
I think you might want to read it.
Okay. These are the check warrants for the month of November. The grand total is $4,535,084.80. I do want to point out that does include, it's a bit higher than usual for a month, but that does include our tax anticipation line of credit payoff of 1.75 million in that number. Just a note there, we actually only had to borrow for about 4 days this year, and so that's great news. Highgate was able to get us our tax payment a few days earlier, and so rather than $30,000 worth of interest is what we paid last year, we only paid a couple $100 worth of interest this year, so that was great. Accounts payable is $2,255,879.40. Payroll checks is $56,747.44. Payroll other disbursements is $1,475,529.96. Payroll deductions is $746,928. Again, the grand total is $4,535,084.80.
So at this time, I would entertain a motion to accept check warrants as read. Devin's the first and Terry's the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of accepting check warrants as read, raise your hand. Motion carries 7-0. Next up is COVID-19 financials. Laura, you're muted.
So that's just a report that I've been providing as requested. I do want to point out that, and I mentioned it earlier, we have finalized our coronavirus relief fund grants that were needed to be expended and reported on prior to the end of December. About $1.5 million for CRF LEA that we've applied for, and hopefully we will receive. I've pretty much solidified that can be accomplished. There is documentation that will be necessary, and we'll have to follow federal grant guidelines on that, but good news there. We also found out that we received over $300,000 in HVAC grant funding, and so hopefully we can make that come to fruition too before the end of December. We were quite upset, and the facility directors were quite upset with all of the effort that they had put in previously with a rep from Efficiency Vermont that we had been denied twice, but we kept pounding away, and we were assigned to a new rep, and voila, over $300,000. So kudos to the facility directors for working with me on that and getting that, not giving up. And we'll do our best to make that happen before December. Some of that equipment I will mention, we were able to get them to pay for the equipment, but it can't be installed due to the timeline before December, but they were able to fund the equipment. So we'll work on the install. We'll have to come from the general fund, or we'll have to work on how we're going to do that, but we wanted to maximize those dollars. So you'll notice all of those different CRF grant awards are coming to fruition when you look at these reports. Everything else we're charging to an ending code of 619. And we're tracking those so that when I start to work on the ESSER grant applications, which would be kind of the next phase, starting in January and going through actually to run in 2022, we'll be able to track those expenses also.
Very good, thank you.
Chris, a question for Dan. Dan, how's the new bus entrance and exit working? I know we talked a lot about it in August and September.
It's actually working quite well. We had a small little hiccup yesterday where we had to kind of close the back gate for a little while and have the buses come around as they normally had done. And it kind of threw a lot of things off. There was a lot of congestion coming out the front entranceway of parents trying to drop off their kids. You know, kind of like what Chris was talking about earlier, we've seen a larger influx of people, parents dropping off in the morning, and it's gone really smooth because those two groups really don't interact anymore. So the buses and the drop-off parents don't interact at all, and that's been great. Things have been really smooth up in the front. So I was down on the road yesterday, going up and down a couple times. It's being well maintained, looks good. There's no potholes or anything along that line. So yeah, it's worked out really well.
So it's just a temporary glitch.
I'm sorry?
I said that was a temporary glitch that happened?
Yesterday?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I don't need to know the particulars. I just.
Okay, good. Yep, temporary glitch. It was a good, yes, temporary glitch.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I believe we can move on to our last item under old business, which is the superintendent evaluation tool, which we are going to need a motion to accept it.
Go
ahead.
I'm gonna let Terry take the lead on this, I think.
You want me to accept it? I'll make the motion to accept it.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept the superintendent evaluation tool. Terry's the first. Do we have a second? I think Devin's raising his hand. So Devin's a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Oh, Peter.
Can we have an explanation or see it, what we're voting on?
Sure.
Sure, I will share it if you like, Terry, while you speak to it. It's in the folder. Terry gave it to me today to put in the folder.
Okay, we had talked about it, remember, before when we talked about how are we going to do the performance review, and we said let's use the job description. And I think when we had talked about it as a board before, then Dawn had the suggestion that we have comment sections, so we added that. So it's really 5 sections. And what it does, as you can see, thank you, Julie, it takes the job description, breaks it out by those domains or, the chief categories of the job description with the listing. And then it has a section under each for us to be able to give evidential, like what we've seen, observations, quantitative or qualitative data to support what we're talking about. Peter, there are still a few things to be worked out that, like, I'm asking you to approve the process here, this procedure, the mechanics of it. We do have a few details, like what months are we going to do it? How are we going to get the input from the board, and who else might we get input from? And those kinds of questions still remain. So if you feel more comfortable waiting until all those are settled or just agreed to, then that's fine. I just thought we could get it going so that we could then work on those details and get the whole process started rather than wait.
Terry, is our goal to have something in place so we can use it between now and June 30?
I'd love to see it before that.
Yeah,
I know
I would too, but within this year. Okay.
Yes. Like, I would love to see it if we started it, really quickly, like January type of thing. Julie, I think, would probably like to have some feedback too. So
yeah, I like that, the idea that maybe January, February, maybe by the time we get the budget done, have a little breather. If we have a breather in February, we could get it done.
Yeah. After the. What were you going to say, Julie?
Oh, I just remember that, we talked with Mike DeWeese about having the goals be a focus one year and then the evaluation based on the job description in year 2. However, this committee has worked really fast. I mean, the job description didn't take a year the way Mike suggested it might. So you turned it around pretty darn quickly. So I don't see why we can't be doing that this spring.
Julie, if you've been involved, or have you worked where they've used this tool before? How does it work as far as does the whole school board sit down with you and review it together? Or do you have a team? How does it normally work? I guess I've never been involved with it.
Usually it's a board chair, but there's sometimes a committee structure that works on it together. I don't know any superintendents that do it the same as others, right? So I think there's some variability there, but it's typically one person that you're working with directly on it as a point person, and then maybe there's a committee of people that are working on it together, and the whole board perhaps has some executive session conversations about the evidence they're gathering. I think those are the conversations you still want to have. But I certainly feel comfortable with the whole board. That's not an issue, but it's not necessarily as efficient a way of getting his input.
Well, one of the things we did talk, and this is one of those issues, Peter, that we're still kind of talking about. We do want the board to give input. How are we going to do it? In the past, and I think our board development task force has been talking about some of these things. With those, I think there's like 6 or 7 domains. Maybe each board member takes one of those domains and keeps evidence of it during the year, kind of thing. Or is responsible for gathering the most, so that we have actual specifics. We haven't really narrowed it out. And I'm glad to hear you say that, Julie. I thought we were like a couple of months behind on what we agreed to at our retreat.
No, you agreed to do the job description and evaluate me using goals this year. And next year you would do the whole system.
Well, good. Let's go back. Let's go back to that agreement, and we can still approve this. We'll just that there will be more on top of it when we actually do it. So good.
I also think that the system really relies a great deal on the superintendent submitting evidence to the board of it, and it's not necessarily every bullet of every domain. That's a lot of evidence. You know, there's usually a submission of evidence from the superintendent, and then you all have your own experiences in the district to add to that data.
Yeah, good, thank you.
That would not be unusual, is what I'm saying.
And you guys, most people here have been managers before, so you've done these kinds of job evaluations and et cetera, job reviews, so.
Okay, are we ready to vote? I believe. Julie, can you stop presenting so I can see everybody?
Yeah, that would really be helpful, wouldn't it?
Just a little bit.
So there you go.
Thank you very much. So all those in favor of accepting the superintendent evaluation tool as presented, raise your hand. Motion carries 7-0. Okay, we're done with old business, and next up is under other business is an employee leave request.
Yes, this one is the one that at the top of the meeting, I had not put it in your folder. I have got it in there now. It's not a particularly confidential item. It's pretty easy to be talking about on camera. We have a preschool paraeducator who works in Wendy's program, who is just about ready for teacher licensure, but the last part of getting that K through 6, probably teaching license, is the student teaching portion. And most student teaching programs do not allow you to work as a paraeducator while you do your internship or your student teaching. And so Micah Orton is requesting a leave of absence. He's somebody that we really, you know, earlier, Dawn, you were talking about recruitment and retention and difficult to fill positions. We are always trying to grow our own professionals here in our community. And this is somebody who lives in our community and we hope would one day apply to be a professional in our community. Whether it's our district or somewhere else in the county, we just are very, very supportive of teacher development. So we would obviously like to approve his request for leave so he can do his student teaching. He'll be doing it in Highgate, I understand.
I move approval.
Don's the first, Terry's the second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the employee leave request, raise your hand. Motion carries 7-0. Okay, let's see. Under other business, we have our task force updates. First up is board goals.
I'll go ahead and start, and then the rest of the group can jump in. And I think probably Julie's the star for putting out the survey so quickly, because that was one of the goals, to try and get information about the board. I don't know, Joanne and Devin, I'll leave it up to you. I know we're going to have another meeting here coming up and do some more work on some of the things that we need to do. Thank you for approving the evaluation process. But Julie, anybody want to jump in? Devin or Joanne?
I don't think I have anything else to add. I think we've been you've seen we've been conducting a lot of our task force work here in these meetings the last couple times and talking about what Kosha presented to us last time, and then the superintendent piece this time. So yep, we'll regroup and on to the next task.
Thank you, Devin. Joanne, did you want to add anything? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, Julie? We're good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And then for the facility task force, I personally don't have anything to add. We haven't done a whole lot. I just got an email from Laura about some septic pump issues in Highgate. I haven't really read through it yet. I did see a pretty large repair price tag on it so far, but it's something we're gonna have to discuss as a facilities committee, and we do have some fair amount of work coming up because we're going to start our interview process for the RFQs, I believe, for the performance contracting. And through that, I'm sure we'll discuss this new problem in Highgate and any other problems in any of the other buildings. Terry.
Can I just add that I'm so glad to be on the board development instead of the septic problem task force.
Well, fortunately, we're not called the septic problem task force, but it is part of the job. So there you go. I don't know.
We thought we were going to
Peter
spend a lot
Dowd-
of time brainstorming and proposing things, and we've been reacting a lot. Seems like we've ended up reacting. Chris, the question would be to Laura, because I did briefly read that. Do you need action tonight?
No, more of just an awareness that it's something that has to happen, and we're doing as much research as we can. But obviously, it needs to be repaired. I'll share more information when we have it.
We just figure, we want to make sure there aren't surprises. So we're just sharing information with the facility.
Just going with the flow, right? Going with the flow? Is that what they're saying?
We hope that the flow is flowing.
I love
one thing about that, because what I did read in the email is you said something about pumps and stuff like that. And I don't remember 100%, but I thought when like 2 or 3 years ago, the Highgate board approved buying a spare pump to keep at Drumex. Terry had brought it to the board as a request. I don't know if we ever did that. I don't know if that even helps the situation at all, but
I can mention it.
But I don't know if that ever, I know he brought the request, but what I don't remember is if we approved it.
Okay, and Drumac is not owned by Drumac anymore either.
Right.
But I will definitely have them go research that.
I am almost thinking Drumac had already sold at that point, so I'm not positive on that, but okay. As long as Peter Don don't have anything to add, that's all we had for the facilities task force.
I just wanted to mention one thing. One of our getting a horrible echo. One of our performance contracting contractors did reach out to me. His wife is for the interviews. His wife is expecting any day. She's overdue now, and he's concerned that, of course, he's so he did put it out there, and I just wanted to share with you. I did let him know that if that did happen, we would obviously, give him a rain date. So I'm just putting it out there.
That seems pretty fair. Okay. So next up is our future meeting dates. Our next board meeting is December 15th, which will be held virtually at 6:30. The next facilities task force meeting is December 8th, and we're actually going to start early because of the interviews. We'll be starting at 3:30. I'm not sure if the board goals task force has a meeting date scheduled. Nope. Okay. So unless anybody, go ahead, Terry.
We're in the midst of setting one up.
Okay. I don't believe we have a need for executive session.
Nope.
I do apologize for being late and missing the beginning of the meeting, so I didn't hear if we needed that. So unless somebody has something to add, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Peter's a first.
Second.
Devin's a second. All those in favor of adjourning at 8:26, raise your hand. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.
Night, everybody.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.